Look, I need to get something off my chest, because apparently everyone thinks I'm some kind of relationship destroyer now. I'm Anna, I'm 23, and 8 months ago I thought I'd found the perfect guy who actually understood that women can have close male friends without it being this huge scandal. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. But not for the reasons you might think. When I matched with Lincoln on a dating app, I was completely upfront about Jared from literally our first real conversation. I told him I had a best friend who happened to be male, that we talked every day, and that he'd been my emotional support through some really dark times in college. Lincoln seemed totally cool with it back then, even said it was attractive that I was so loyal to my friends. I showed him our text conversations, our photos together from college events, everything. There were no secrets, no hidden agendas, just total transparency about this friendship that meant the world to me. Jared and I met during sophomore year when my life was completely falling apart. My boyfriend had cheated on me with my roommate, actually my roommate, and I was having a full breakdown. Couldn't get out of bed, stopped going to classes, the whole thing. Jared was in my statistics study group and noticed I'd disappeared for 2 weeks. Instead of just moving on like most people would, he showed up at my dorm with coffee and just sat there while I ugly cried about what a piece of garbage my ex was. From that moment, Jared became my person. He helped me get through the rest of that semester, made sure I was eating, listened to me vent about family drama, anxiety, whatever I needed to talk about. So when I started dating Lincoln, I made it crystal clear that Jared wasn't going anywhere. These are completely different types of relationships, and I don't get why guys can't understand that concept. Jared fills this emotional support role where he just gets me without having to explain everything. With Lincoln, it was more like I had to walk him through my feelings step by step. Don't get me wrong, Lincoln tried, but Jared and I have this natural understanding from years of friendship that you can't just recreate overnight. Our daily phone calls were totally normal too. Girls talk to their girlfriends constantly and nobody thinks twice about it. But suddenly, when it's a guy friend, everyone loses their minds. Jared and I usually talked for 15 to 20 minutes after work, sometimes longer if something stressful was happening. We'd catch up on our days, complain about annoying coworkers, talk about whatever show we were both watching. Completely innocent stuff. And yeah, we'd say love you when we hung up, but that's just how we are with each other. It's like saying love you to a brother. Lincoln seemed fine with everything initially. He'd even joke when Jared called during our dates, like, "Oh, there's your other boyfriend," which I thought was sweet because it showed he wasn't threatened. Jared would give me advice about relationship stuff from a guy's perspective. Tell me I looked good in outfit photos I'd send him, normal friend things. He'd say protective stuff like Lincoln better treat you right, which was obviously just friend talk. Lincoln even met Jared a few times and they got along fine. Jared was always polite, asking about Lincoln's work and interests. I remember thinking how perfect it was that the two most important guys in my life actually liked each other. But then Jared's girlfriend broke up with him, out of nowhere, and she specifically mentioned his friendship with me as one of her concerns. She told him it was weird that he talked to another girl every day, and that she felt like she was competing with me. I thought that was completely ridiculous. Jared and I are friends, we've been friends since college, and any girlfriend worth dating would just have to accept that. But Jared was really devastated because he genuinely cared about her. He started calling me more frequently because he was depressed and needed someone to talk through his feelings, and obviously I was going to be there for him. That's what real friends do. I explained the situation to Lincoln, told him Jared was going through a rough patch and needed extra support right now. I thought Lincoln would be understanding since he'd been through breakups before. But instead, he got this weird expression and said, "So now I have to compete with his relationship problems too." I was like, "What are you talking about? There's no competition here. I'm just being a good friend to someone who's hurting." Lincoln started making comments about how convenient it was that Jared's ex had the same concerns he did, and maybe multiple people were trying to tell us something about our friendship. That really annoyed me because Lincoln was basically siding with some random girl he'd never met over his own girlfriend. Jared's ex was obviously just jealous and insecure, and now Lincoln was buying into that same toxic mindset. I told him that just because two people shared the same insecurity didn't make their concerns valid. Plenty of people have irrational fears about their partner's friendships, and that doesn't mean those friendships are actually inappropriate. During this time, Jared was really struggling emotionally. He'd call me upset sometimes, talking about how he felt like maybe his ex was right about him being too attached to people. I felt terrible, because Jared is honestly one of the sweetest guys I know, and seeing him beat himself up over some girl's jealousy was heartbreaking. I'd spend extra time reassuring him that he was a great friend, and that the right person would appreciate his loyalty instead of feeling threatened by it. Sometimes our calls went longer than usual because he really needed to work through his emotions, and I wasn't going to cut him off just because Lincoln might get annoyed. Lincoln started getting passive-aggressive about the longer calls. He'd make little comments like, "Oh, another Jared crisis tonight?" Or, "Let me guess, therapy session time." I told him he was being insensitive and that Jared was genuinely depressed. I reminded him that Jared had been there for me during my worst times, so I wasn't going to abandon him when he needed support. Lincoln would say stuff like, "I'm not asking you to abandon him. I'm just saying, maybe he should talk to an actual therapist instead of his female friend every night." That made me mad because he was basically saying I wasn't qualified to support my own friend. I started seeing a different side of Lincoln during this period. He became really demanding of my attention and would get moody if I spent too much time on the phone with Jared. He'd interrupt our calls by being loud in the background or asking me random questions that could have waited. When I'd call him out on it, he'd say, "I just wanted to spend time with my girlfriend." Is that so wrong? But it felt manipulative to me, like he was trying to make me choose between them instead of accepting that I could care about both. I began wondering if Lincoln was as mature as I'd initially thought. Things came to a head when Lincoln sat me down for what he called a serious conversation about boundaries. He said he'd been thinking about our future and was concerned about how my friendship with Jared might affect our relationship long term. He asked me to consider limiting our daily phone calls, and maybe not sharing as many personal details about our relationship with Jared. I was honestly shocked that he was asking me to change a fundamental part of my life for his comfort. I told him that Jared and I had established communication patterns long before Lincoln came into the picture, and I wasn't going to alter a healthy friendship just because he felt threatened. Lincoln kept pushing, saying daily hour-long phone calls with another guy were inappropriate for someone in a committed relationship. He said Jared knew intimate details about our relationship and our problems, and he felt like that violated privacy between us. I explained that talking to friends about relationship issues is completely normal. Girls do it all the time, and getting outside perspective actually helps me be a better partner. I told him Jared often gave me good advice about communicating with Lincoln, so if anything, Jared was helping our relationship. But Lincoln wasn't hearing it. He said what bothered him most was that I seemed to prioritize Jared's needs over his feelings. He brought up specific times I'd cut dates short to take Jared's calls, or been distracted during conversations because Jared had texted something important. I tried explaining that Jared was going through a difficult time and needed extra support, but Lincoln said it shouldn't be my job to be Jared's emotional caretaker at the expense of our relationship. I got really defensive because Lincoln was basically attacking my character and loyalty as a friend. I told him that maintaining close friendships was actually a positive trait, and if he couldn't appreciate that about me, maybe we weren't as compatible as I thought. I said any guy who truly loved me would want me to be someone who shows up for her friends, not someone who abandons people when a boyfriend gets uncomfortable. Lincoln said he wasn't asking me to abandon Jared, just establish healthier boundaries that respected our relationship too. But here's the thing. Lincoln was moving the goalposts on me. When we first started dating, he said he admired my loyalty to Jared. Now suddenly that same loyalty was a problem because it didn't center around him. I felt like he basically lied about being okay with my friendship just to get me to date him. And now that he felt secure, he was trying to change the rules. That felt manipulative and dishonest. I told him if he'd had a problem with Jared from the beginning, he should have said something instead of pretending to be cool with it and then blindsiding me months later. Then, Jared told me about this trip he'd been planning to visit his family back home, and he wanted me to come since I'd never met them, and they'd heard so much about me over the years. Just the two of us. Separate hotel rooms obviously, but a long weekend in his hometown. Jared was excited because he thought it would be good for both of us. He'd see his family, and I'd get a break from all the relationship stress. We'd been talking about this trip since college. I thought it sounded amazing. Jared's family had always been welcoming when I talked to them on the phone, and I was curious to see where he grew up. Plus, I really needed a break from all the drama with Lincoln. I figured if I explained we'd have separate rooms and it was just a platonic friend trip, Lincoln would handle it. People take trips with friends all the time. When I told Lincoln about the trip, he completely lost it. He said there was no way he could be okay with me going on an overnight trip with another guy, regardless of sleeping arrangements. He said it looked terrible from the outside, and he'd be humiliated if his friends found out his girlfriend was traveling alone with her male best friend. I tried explaining that Jared and I had been planning this for years, and his family was expecting me. But Lincoln kept saying the optics were terrible, and no reasonable boyfriend would be okay with this. I got frustrated because Lincoln was saying appearances mattered more than trust and reality. I told him if he truly believed I was faithful, it shouldn't matter what other people thought about my friendship with Jared. The fact that he was more concerned about looking stupid to his friends than trusting his girlfriend said everything about his priorities. I said confident men don't try to control their partner's friendships out of fear of judgment. Lincoln fired back that this wasn't about control. It was about respect and boundaries. He said most people would agree that solo trips with opposite-sex friends were inappropriate in committed relationships, and I was being deliberately obtuse by pretending otherwise. He asked how I'd feel if he went on a weekend trip with a close female friend. I told him I'd be fine with it as long as I trusted him and knew the friend, which I genuinely believed at the time. The conversation got heated until Lincoln gave me an ultimatum. He said I had to choose between the trip with Jared or staying in a relationship with him, because he couldn't handle both. He said if our relationship meant anything to me, I'd prioritize his feelings over a weekend trip with another guy. I was so angry that he was making me choose over something so innocent. I told him ultimatums were emotional manipulation, and if he couldn't trust me enough to go on a trip with my friend, maybe we didn't have the foundation for a serious relationship. I decided to go on the trip anyway, because I wasn't going to let Lincoln's insecurities dictate my life choices. I'd already committed to Jared and his family, and I'd been looking forward to it for months. If I gave in to Lincoln's ultimatum, it would set a precedent that he could control my friendships whenever he felt threatened. I told Lincoln I was sorry he felt that way, but I was going on the trip as planned, and hopefully he'd come to his senses while I was gone. Lincoln broke up with me on the spot. He said he couldn't be in a relationship with someone who would choose another man over him, even if that man was supposedly just a friend. He said my decision to prioritize the trip proved he was right to be concerned about my friendship with Jared. I was shocked he was actually ending things over this, but also kind of relieved because it proved he wasn't the mature guy I thought I was dating. I told all my friends and family that Lincoln had broken up with me for having a male best friend, and most of them were supportive. They agreed he was being controlling and unreasonable. My mom said any man worth dating would trust me and respect my friendships. Even some of Lincoln's friends reached out to say they thought he was overreacting. I felt validated that other people could see how ridiculous Lincoln was being. The trip started exactly as I'd hoped. Jared's family was amazing. Warm, funny, welcoming. They treated me like I'd been part of the family for years. We spent the day exploring Jared's hometown, visiting his old school and favorite restaurants. For the first time in months, I felt relaxed and happy without worrying about Lincoln analyzing every interaction. But on our last night, everything changed. Jared and I were having drinks at a local bar, talking about how great the trip had been. The conversation turned to Lincoln and our breakup, and Jared said he felt terrible that his friendship had caused problems for me. I assured him it wasn't his fault, and that Lincoln's reaction had shown me his true colors. That's when Jared got serious and said there was something he needed to tell me. Jared confessed he'd had feelings for me for years. Basically, since we first became close in college. He said he'd never acted on them because he valued our friendship too much to risk ruining it, but watching me go through relationships with guys who didn't appreciate me had been torture. He said Lincoln's concerns weren't completely unfounded because Jared did hope, deep down, that someday I'd see him as more than a friend. His recent breakup made him realize life was too short to hide his feelings. I was completely stunned. All this time I'd been defending our friendship as purely platonic, and Jared had been harboring romantic feelings I had no idea about. I felt like such an idiot for not seeing the signs, and betrayed that he'd let me go through all this drama with Lincoln while knowing Lincoln's instincts were actually right. I asked Jared how long he'd felt this way, and whether he'd maintained our friendship under false pretenses. I had to reject Jared because I genuinely didn't see him that way. Our friendship meant everything to me, but I'd never felt any romantic attraction to him. He was like a brother to me, and changing that dynamic felt wrong. I tried to let him down gently, explaining that I loved him as a friend, but couldn't force feelings that weren't there. I said I hoped we could continue our friendship even though I couldn't give him what he wanted romantically. But Jared didn't take the rejection well. He said he couldn't just go back to being friends after putting his feelings out there, and it would be too painful to maintain our relationship knowing I'd never see him the way he saw me. He said he needed space to get over his feelings, which meant we couldn't talk every day anymore or maintain our previous level of closeness. I was devastated because I was losing my best friend right after losing my boyfriend. When I got home, I was completely alone for the first time in years. No boyfriend, no best friend, just me trying to figure out what had happened to my life. I kept replaying everything, wondering if I'd missed obvious signs about Jared's feelings or been naive about our friendship. Part of me was angry that Jared had let me defend our relationship as purely platonic when he knew it wasn't, at least from his perspective. I tried reaching out to Lincoln a few times because I thought maybe if I explained what happened with Jared, he'd realize his concerns had been valid and we could work things out. But Lincoln didn't respond, and I heard through mutual friends that he was already talking to someone new. That stung, because it felt like I'd meant so little to him that he could just move on immediately. Jared and I tried to maintain some kind of friendship, but it was awkward and strained. Our daily phone calls stopped completely, and when we did talk, there was weird tension where I could tell he was holding back. He started dating someone new within weeks, which hurt even though I knew I had no right to be upset. It felt like he was trying to prove he could get over me while replacing our friendship with someone who could give him what I couldn't. 3 months later, Jared completely blindsided me by sharing screenshots of our private conversations with Lincoln and some mutual friends. The messages showed me complaining about Lincoln, calling him insecure and controlling, and discussing intimate details of our relationship that I'd shared with Jared in confidence. They also showed Jared making comments that were definitely flirtier than I'd remembered, and my responses that could be interpreted as encouraging, even though I'd meant them platonically. The worst part was that Jared added his own commentary to the screenshots, explaining his side of our friendship and painting me as someone who'd led him on while using him for emotional support. He made it sound like I'd known about his feelings all along and deliberately strung him along while dating other people. His version made me look manipulative and dishonest, and I had no way to defend myself without looking worse. The social fallout was immediate and devastating. Friends who'd initially supported me through the breakup started questioning my version of events and wondering if I'd been lying about the nature of my friendship with Jared. People began treating me differently, like I was someone who couldn't be trusted with their secrets or boyfriends. I heard Lincoln felt vindicated by Jared's revelations and had been telling people he'd dodged a bullet. My reputation in our social circle was completely destroyed. People started seeing me as someone who maintained inappropriate relationships and played innocent when confronted. Several female friends distanced themselves because they didn't want their boyfriends getting the wrong idea about hanging out with someone who had boundary issues. I felt like I was being punished for something I hadn't even realized I was doing. The worst part was seeing how happy Lincoln looked with his new girlfriend. They'd been together for months by this point, and from social media, she seemed like everything I wasn't. Quiet, reserved, apparently okay with having a small social circle without close male friends. Lincoln looked more relaxed and content than I'd ever seen him, which made me question whether I'd been the problem all along. I ended up having to move back in with my parents because I couldn't afford my apartment without Lincoln's help with expenses, which was humiliating at 23. My dating life became non-existent because word had gotten around about my tendency to maintain close relationships with male friends, and guys were wary of getting involved with someone who had that reputation. The few dates I went on ended badly when guys would ask about past relationships, and I'd have to explain the Jared situation. Even now, months later, I still don't think I did anything fundamentally wrong. Maybe I should have been more aware of how my friendship with Jared looked from the outside, and maybe I should have picked up on his romantic feelings sooner. But I was honest about our relationship from the beginning. I never cheated on Lincoln physically or emotionally, and I genuinely believed Jared and I were just close friends. The fact that Jared had hidden feelings doesn't make me responsible for leading him on, and Lincoln being insecure doesn't automatically make his concerns valid. What really happened is I was dealing with two emotionally immature men who couldn't handle a woman having close platonic relationships. Lincoln was too insecure to trust his girlfriend's judgment about her own friendships, and Jared was too cowardly to be honest about his feelings until it was too late. Instead of taking responsibility for their own issues, they both decided to make me the villain in their stories. Now I'm supposedly the cautionary tale about emotional cheating and inappropriate friendships, when really, I'm just someone who valued loyalty and refused to abandon a friend to make a boyfriend feel better. The whole situation has made me more guarded about trusting people and more cynical about relationships. I've learned that men will say they're okay with your friendships until they decide they're not, and friends will betray your confidence the moment they don't get what they want from you. I've also learned that society is still backwards about male-female friendships, and women are expected to sacrifice their independence and support systems to make romantic partners feel secure. None of that seems fair or reasonable to me. I'm not apologizing for being a loyal friend or for refusing to let jealousy and insecurity dictate my relationships. If that makes me difficult to date or hard to be friends with, then so be it. I'd rather be alone than pretend to be someone I'm not, just to make other people comfortable. Maybe someday I'll meet people who can appreciate my loyalty and independence instead of feeling threatened by them. But until then, I'm not changing who I am to fit into other people's narrow ideas about how women should behave in relationships.